Are you ready to improve your health without the unrealistic BS? You're tuning in to Healthy Not Hungry, the podcast that believes that health begins in your mind. I'm your host, clinical nutritionist, PT, and mental health enthusiast Rach, and I'm so excited to have you join me. Hello and welcome to another episode of Healthy Not Hungry. I'm your host Rach. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today we are discussing how eating badly actually worsens our mental health. So if you're not new to this, you've probably heard me talk about how eating healthy and nutritionally can enhance our mental health and our mood and our well-being and our concentration and our memory. But I want to talk about the other end of it today because I think sometimes when we realize the negatives of something, it makes us a little bit more wanting to avoid that and willing to do the things that we can do to be more positive, if that makes sense. So I know I can give you like the positive aspects of eating healthy, but I think when we understand how when we eat badly, we usually feel pretty crap, I think it's important to understand why that is and what it does. So I've broken it down into a few different pointers for today. So number one that I want to start with is blood sugar crashes, and that usually creates mood swings and irritability. So if you've ever heard of the term hangry, this is what we're talking about. So when we eat high sugar processed foods, they actually spike our blood sugar levels and then drop them just as quickly. So you're kind of on a roller coaster. So you go up really high and then you crash smack bang. And basically when we have this crash, it leads to irritability, anxiety, brain fog, and it can even cause panic-like symptoms depending on the person and how they're wired. But we're talking things that are like high in sugar, highly processed, your high GI, so your high glycemic index, because what that happens is we're not stabilizing our blood sugar. So on the flip side of this, that's why we say it's really important to eat complex carbohydrates and whole grains and more slow releasing foods so that we're not going up and then dropping, we're upping a little bit and we're staying stable at that level because it helps to avoid these things. The next one I want to talk about is how when we have a low nutrient intake, we have a low mood. So our brain needs nutrients, especially omega-3s. So you'll find those in your fish oils and your DHA and EPA. B vitamins, magnesium, and zinc are some of the main nutrients that our brain needs to produce neurotransmitters, which is like the feel-good hormones. So things like serotonin and dopamine. So they're the chemicals in our brain that make us feel happy and relaxed and calm and excited and all the good things. So we need those, and we need those specific nutrients to help produce those. So when we have a diet that's lacking in whole nutrient-rich foods, that's when we do see things like low mood, depression, and anxiety, and especially over time. So if you're someone who is depleted with nutrients for a period of time, it may not be straight away or the first week, but you might find after a while you are contributing. And it's one of those things, what came first, the chicken or the egg? What came first? Was it the anxiety and the depression and the low moods, which then made you not want to eat well? Or were you not eating well, which contributed? Because this goes on both ends here. So I guess the end that we're looking at today is, well, how can we make sure that we're eating the right foods and not eating the wrong things that end up with us feeling worse, if that makes sense? So the next one I want to discuss is gut health. So if you've ever heard of the gut-brain axis, this is what we're talking about. So that is, it shows that our gut and our brain are deeply connected through what we call the gut-brain axis. So basically how this works is if your gut's inflamed or imbalanced, could be due to a poor diet, or maybe you've had some other things, maybe you've been on different medications that have killed your good bacteria and you're in a dysbiosis or imbalanced. This can negatively affect your mental health. So fun fact, about 90% of serotonin, so that's the feel-good neurotransmitter or chemical that we just spoken about earlier, is actually made in the gut. So if we don't have a nice balanced thing, environment of our gut, it actually stops us being able to produce some of those good hormones. In saying that as well, if we've got inflammation, firstly, if you feel physically uncomfortable, it makes you feel yuck. That's a big part there. But when you've got inflammation, it leads to the brain as well, which then causes inflammation, which means it can't think properly, it can't produce all of those other neurotransmitters that we would like it to produce. So it's really important that we look after our gut health. So quick gut health chat. Basically, if you think about a seesaw, we need to have both good and bad bacteria, but we want to make sure that on the seesaw, the good bacteria is outweighing the bad. So when we have things like antibiotics, what happens is that kills all the bacteria. So it kills the good and the bad. So it's really important that the bad will naturally come back, but sometimes the good doesn't. So we need to make sure we're doing things to increase that good so that we can have that better gut-brain axis, so that that's not a contributing factor to a decline in our mental health. I feel like I went on a bit of a tangent there, but back on track. So next one is highly processed foods actually creates more mental fatigue. So diets that are high in ultra processed foods, so we're talking like chips, fast food, sugary snacks, as I mentioned before, highly processed, highly sugar, high glycemic index, they're linked to higher rates of depression and anxiety. Like, there's been so many studies, it's not funny, but these foods lack the nutrients that the brain needs to function optimally and can leave you feeling mentally sluggish, tired, unfocused, like you don't have energy, which then can lead to you feeling worse. And it's one of those things, right? It's like when you feel bad, you don't want to do the good things. So you don't want to eat well. You don't want to go outside and get some fresh air and go for a walk. You don't want to chat to your loved ones or participate in activities that make you feel better. So it's like a cycle, and it's a very quick downhill stream. The next one I want to talk about is dehydration. So if you've heard me talk before, you know I love water and I love people drinking water. But here's the reason why. So when we're dehydrated, we actually increase our anxiety and brain fog. This is because not drinking enough water can lead to fatigue, poor concentration, and mimic the feelings of anxiety. So you may not even be anxious, you're just dehydrated, but because of it, you feel anxious. So it's really important that we do get that hydration up, because people can not constantly, but they can confuse dehydration symptoms with mental health issues. So especially when it gets cooler months, I find people tend to back off on the water, but as an adult, you minimally need to be having 2 liters of water a day. If you're someone who's highly active, if you're out in the sun a lot, if you're sweating a lot, really you need to be aiming for 3. So if you are finding that you are dehydrated and you're feeling more feelings of anxiety or depression, drink some more water and see if that helps you along the way. The next one we've got is skipping meals equals increased stress response. So when you skip meals or undereat, your body releases more cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So I've spoken about this before as well. There's actually an episode on it. So make sure you check that out. But basically, cortisol triggers anxiety, overwhelm, and poor emotional regulation. So consistent and balanced meals help to stabilize our nervous system because they help to reduce that cortisol level rather than spike it. So really important to make sure you're eating regular meals when we're looking, as we mentioned earlier, to do with blood sugar levels too. When we're not eating regularly, so if you go ages without, that is when you can have that blood sugar crash as well, which once again adds to your mood. So I think eating regular meals is really, really important when we're looking after our mental health and how we're feeling. All right. And the last one I'm going to discuss is poor nutrition leads to sleep disruption. And when we don't get enough sleep, as I'm sure a lot of you know, that does add to our mental health as well. So basically, eating badly, especially before bedtime, can disrupt your sleep quality. So especially if you're having a lot of sugars, a lot of things that you're struggling to digest when you should be going to sleep, it can really affect your sleep. And maybe it stops you sleeping. Or maybe if you are skipping meals, maybe you're waking up hungry throughout the night. There could be a plethora of reasons. We might do another episode going into that. But basically, poor sleep has a direct negative impact on mental resilience, mood regulation, and motivation. Also, going back to cortisol, the stress hormone we spoke about, when you're not getting enough sleep, you're putting your body in a state of stress and you are increasing those cortisol levels higher as well. So all these things, when we're looking at what we eat, what we do, are we exercising, how much are we stressing, are we sleeping, are we drinking enough water, they all intertwine with each other, particularly when it comes to our mental health. So when it comes to producing the things that make us feel better and improve our mood, our concentration, our mental resilience, the things that add to it to make it feel worse. It's really, really important that we look at this from a holistic perspective. But I'm going to leave you with that. I feel like I've rambled a bit and just info dumped a lot on that one, but hopefully it does show you why it is really, really important to make sure you're eating a healthy, balanced diet full of great nutrients, particularly when it comes to our mental health. And that, when we don't do that and we do the opposite, it really can cause negative implications that otherwise we could hopefully avoid. So it is one of those things, if you are struggling in this area right now, as always, feel free to reach out on Instagram at Healthy Not Hungry Podcast. I'd love to chat to you and help you navigate where you're going and maybe some areas that you could improve this. Or, find someone who you can talk to help with. And as well, if you are struggling mentally, there is always help and support. So make sure you reach out. In Australia, we have Lifeline. I'll make sure that's linked in the show notes as well. And we have a bunch of other great services that are available online and by phone 24/7. But look after yourselves and look after each other. And if you think that you've got a friend who could really benefit from listening to this and getting that little bit of extra motivation as to why eating well really does matter for our mental health, please share this along with them. And yeah, thank you for listening and have a fantastic day. Well, that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for tuning in and joining us once again. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and leave a review on your favorite podcast streaming site or share with someone who you think could benefit from this episode. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media at Healthy Not Hungry or Healthy Not Hungry Podcast.